Why were the leaders of the Confederacy, who led the South in a bloody war against the Union, not severely punished after the Civil War? This question may perplex many who look back on the historical events of the mid-19th century. The Civil War, which ended in 1865, was a tumultuous and devastating period in American history. Yet, in its aftermath, the leaders of the Confederacy, the Southern states that had seceded from the Union, were treated with surprising leniency. The reasons for this decision were rooted in the politics, practicality, and philosophy of the time. The primary goal of President Abraham Lincoln, and later his successor Andrew Johnson, was to reunite the nation swiftly. They wanted to heal the wounds inflicted by the war, aiming to reintegrate the Southern states back into the Union as quickly and smoothly as possible. This approach is known today as Reconstruction. The logic was simple. Punishing Confederate leaders could have exacerbated lingering resentments and prolonged the divide between the North and South. It was believed that clement treatment could encourage former Confederates to swear allegiance to the Union and participate constructively in rebuilding the nation. From a legal perspective, there were practical barriers to severe punishments. Treason trials could have been complicated and contentious, potentially setting dangerous precedents. In 1866, Congress did pass the 14th Amendment, which included provisions that restricted former Confederate leaders from holding public office unless Congress removed such restrictions. However, subsequent presidential pardons and political compromises often softened these restrictions. By the end of the 19th century, most former Confederate leaders had their full rights restored. Another consideration was the dire economic and social conditions of the South. The U.S. government needed cooperation from local leaders to rebuild, which would have been more difficult if those leaders were under threat of severe penalties. Yet, it's important to note the role of prevailing racial attitudes. The interests of freed slaves were often neglected in favor of expedient reunification. The leniency towards Confederate leaders contrasted sharply with the ongoing struggles and violence faced by African Americans during Reconstruction and beyond. In summary, the leniency towards Confederate leaders after the Civil War was driven by a desire for swift reunification, practical legal considerations, and a prioritization of white Southern cooperation over the rights of freed slaves. These decisions had far-reaching implications, contributing to the legacy of racial inequality and tension that persists in America today.